Gołuchów, heritage lost, regained and protected. From time immemorial, human settlements existed on this stretch of land in the valley of the Trzemna River, which is now known as Ciemna. A clearing surrounded by trees features the oldest traces of human presence. Nearby there are more modern results of human activity: vineyards and pineapples which grow in greenhouses and a road lined with linden trees. "500 meters away you can find artifacts such as vases from 2,500 years ago, not buried in the ground but in showcases in a castle which is a branch of the National Museum in Poznań. A bit further on, in buildings that in the past served as farm and residential buildings, you can find the Forestry Museum. Its collection documents the multi-generational heritage of local foresters. A 30-minute walk away is a place where the European bison, which was spurred from the verge of extinction, live, along with the Polish horse breed known as the konik, descendant of the wild horse, the tarpan. These were brought here from the former landed estate of the Zamoyski family. All that can be found in an area of no more than 2 square kilometers, in a historic park in its vicinity, on the edge of a village with a population of 2,000, on a road leading from the town of Kalisz to the city of Poznań. You can drive by in less than a minute, oblivious of all the wonders which hide among the lush greenery. Let's stay here for a bit. When 130 years ago, the idea of a forestry museum was born among members of the Galicia Forest Society, an English park was being laid out in the village of Gołuchów. The then owner of the estate, Izabela Działyńska born Czartoryska, founded a private museum in the castle featuring an art collection. Her dream was to bring in visitors eager to admire historical artifacts and those with a keen interest in nature. What's this place like more than a century later? The castle. We owe the castle's present shape to Princess Izabela of the Czartoryski family and Jan Działyński, who at the end of the 19th century rebuilt it in the French Renaissance style, while at the same time preserving the heritage of the Leszczyński family, the founders of the castle. The building is a historical treasure. In front of it stands an imposing linden tree some 300 years younger than the castle itself. Since 1951, the castle has been the property of the National Museum in Poznań, which takes care of it as one of its branches. Inspired by the past, its owners collected art objects and unique historical artifacts. They opened the museum to the public. In the historic interiors you can admire Italian and French fireplaces, tapestries, paintings, pieces of sculpture, antique furniture, as well as ancient pottery brought here from Europe and the Middle East. The collection of ancient vases, which in the year 1939 numbered 259, was considered one of the most valuable in Europe. During World War II, the castle was robbed by the invaders and the collection was dispersed. Some of the art pieces returned to Gołuchów, so now visitors can get a feel of what it was like to tour the museum back in the 19th century. Among those who visited Gołuchów in the late 1900s were some noble guests, including Prince Radziwiłł, who lived in his Antonin residence. Adam Kubaszewski, the park's founder, gardener and designer, wrote about it in his diaries. Forestry Center. In 1921, members of the Forestry Society in Jarocin came here. Could one of them be the great-grandfather of someone who today cares for the preservation of the forest heritage, carries on the tradition, develops the museum collection and gives talks about it? Apart from the castle, the Gołuchów residential complex is home to the Forestry Center, a unit of the State Forests National Holding. The complex includes 14 buildings and 4 outhouses, which have been restored with great care by Polish foresters. The largest of the buildings houses the museum, where you can find out about the past and present day of Polish forests. Forestry Museum. The 10,000 collected exhibits illustrate historical events. They show the way forests were managed in the past and the way the principle of sustainability is implemented in today's practice. Some of the exhibits are displayed indoors, others can be found outdoors. Still others are kept in storage, waiting for their time to go on show, both in Gołuchów and in other places in Poland. The main outbuilding, whose construction was completed in 1853, once served as a distillery. It was later converted for residential purposes, and now it houses 2 exhibitions: the cultural role of the forest and the history of forestry in Poland. Nineteenth and 20th century paintings, graphics, pieces of sculpture and other artworks are on display in restored interiors. The exhibition features works by sculptor Bronisław Chromy, who is famous for the figure of the Wawel Castle Dragon in Kraków, painter Leon Wyczółkowski, who is known for his fine graphics, and another recognized painter, Julian Fałat. Also on show are carved antlers, sculpted bracket fungi and inlaid wooden panels. All the works were inspired by nature. You can also learn about the history of Polish forestry with a wealth of archived documents, photos and foresters' uniforms. In the Sylvan, one of the oldest forestry journals in the world, we can read about the condition of forests at the time. Forest cover 100 years later is shown on a map drafted for a world exhibition in New York by Eliasz Kanarek and his team. The ways the abundance of forest plants and wildlife served mankind in past centuries are presented in chronological order. You can find out all about tar and potash, and you can watch a beekeeper climbing a tall pine tree. Beekeeping. Beekeeping as part of humanity's intangible heritage included on the UNESCO World Heritage List is featured in the exhibition, including a display of tree hollows and logs taken from trees where bees used to be kept, and educational workshops run by a beekeeper. Shall we look for an old honeypot among the castle's ancient vessels? The abundance of Polish forests and their protection nowadays are documented by multimedia exhibitions held in the former coach house. The building was erected in 1854 on the initiative of Count Jan Działyński. For years it served as a horse stable and a garage. Following renovation work, which was carried out at the end of the last century, it now hosts nature exhibitions showing the structure of the forest and the protection of animals, plants and fungi in Poland. Here we focus on restitution programs of endangered species and the history of the mighty European bison. Dioramas of the European oak hornbeam and boreal spruce forest show the life of the forest. They attract the attention of children and adults. For bookworms and those into herbariums, we recommend a collection of old and new albums featuring dried shoots, leaves, fruit, flowers, pieces of wood and tree bark coming from Polish forests. In the former sheepfold, measuring instruments, tools and machines used in forestry machinery have been gathered. They illustrate the stages of the forester's work: seed cultivation, tree planting, maintenance and protection. Here visitors learn about the sustainable sourcing of wood and how the various instruments were once used to measure and study the forest. There's something for everyone in an exhibition area of over 1,000 square meters. Pieces of 500-year-old timber from the Kraków Barbican, the lightest type of wood coming from the balsa tree, displays of old forest techniques and lots more. Exhibitions are also mounted at the center in a reconstructed cottage, a forester's lodge which features an office kitted out in the style of the 1950s and an exhibition devoted to beekeeping. Nearby, there's another 19th century building, originally a stable, which now houses an exhibition entitled Forest Protection. The exhibition is devoted to biotic threats, that means those caused by fungi or insects, abiotic ones, that is caused by wind and other natural factors, and anthropogenic ones caused by humans. We regularly organize topical exhibitions here, presenting the work of contemporary artists or museum collections which have never before gone on show. And apart from indoor exhibitions, we also organize outdoor exhibitions. Park Arboretum. To meet the king of the forest, the European bison, face to face, it is enough to take a 30-minute walk to the nearby forest. Walking down the paths in the park, such as this one lined with imposing linden trees, which were planted here in 1856, you can admire the dendrological collection of trees brought from various corners of the world over the past 150 years. The park covers an area of some 160 hectares. It stretches along a 3-kilometer section of the Ciemna River. Its southern part is an arboretum, while the northern part is a forest habitat. About 500 species and varieties of trees and shrubs grow here. The park is a natural highlight of the Ciemna River Valley protected area of outstanding natural beauty. Since 1965, the area has been on the Regional Register of Natural Sanctuaries. Izabela and Jan Działyński founded the park in the late 19th century as an English landscape garden. The person who particularly contributed to its creation was chief gardener Adam Kubaszewski, who worked here for over 50 years. He left behind numerous notes which help us recreate the original look of the gardens. Over 200 trees have reached monumental size, and the 3 most valuable ones have been named Izabela, Jan and Adam after the founders of the place. Here, visitors enjoy walking down 26 kilometers of paths, as well as numerous resting places. Scenic paths lead to ponds, other beauty spots, herbal and flower gardens, vast meadows and clusters of trees which provide shade. Animal Farm. On the west side of the park lies an animal farm where you can see the European bison, Polish konik horses, fallow deer and wild boar. The reserve was set up in 1977. The wild animals can be watched in natural surroundings from elevated viewing platforms. For those interested, there are information boards which play an educational role. Special attention is paid to the lowland bison. The first female bison came from the Białowieże and Pszczyna reserves. Over 100 bison have been born here. The center takes an active part in the protection of the European bison and works together with research and breeding centers. The Forestry Center in Gołuchów is a place where history, culture and nature are combined to offer unique educational and sightseeing experiences. You can organize one-day family stays, short and extended school trips, and take part in festivals and other events devoted to forestry and hunting traditions. The Działyński and Czartoryski families and generations of foresters all shared the same aspirations to preserve the ancestors' heritage for posterity. Here, this heritage includes the landscape, the museum, the archive and the library. They all have stories to tell.